Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Hard to believe that I'm saying this for almost the 190th time, but it's very exciting. And quite frankly, I'm Bill Correll. I have been for most of my life, not in the womb, but shortly thereafter. That being said, I'm here with my partner in crime, who I lovingly refer to as my twin. That would be Jan Jeremias. And then we have joining us this week, and I'm very excited about this, a dear friend to both of us, Elizabeth Barbour. And I think, we typically just jump out of an airplane and sort of parachute into every conversation. No idea where we're going to land, and we don't really care. It's all about the trip, isn't it?
Yep, and I like to think of it as the journey.
The journey, yes.
Yeah, it's a gentler way of saying trip.
Yeah, there's a lot of room to say, I don't know, in the kind of trip that we usually take. So just to kind of refresh for all of you listeners and for us too, just so we can ground ourselves a little bit here. We're really in search of, pathways to empowerment. The notion that we're off our game or life's bigger than we are for a period of time, that's the human condition. That's just what we wake up into every day. And it could be physical, structural, it could be conversational, and it all kind of gets sorted down to these emotions inside of us, which we choose to either take on, ignore, bury, or just say nuts to you, I'm going on about my day. So if we get anywhere close to coming up with something that works for you, I hope that brings value into your life. And I think with that said, we are seeing some remarkable things happening in the world right now. What I'm talking about is there's transformational stuff happening all over the globe. And what it is basically doing is the structural and physical world is coming hard up against people's conversations of the last 25 and 30 years. And there are people who are in many countries making decisions to go a different way, financially, in politics, government, all the rest of that sort of thing. There's kind of a resurgence, back to, I would say, to being, less on the airy-fairy spiritual side. And a lot of people are actually seeking organized religion again, which I can tell you that that's kind of how the pendulum swings. It'll go all the way out one direction, and then it always wants to come back and find the center. But I think in the meantime, it gives people an opportunity, especially the way we've been living since COVID, to come out of your shell a little bit and go looking for your tribe. There are folks out there in the world that are speaking and thinking exactly the way that you do. And that's not a bad place to start for re-socializing yourself and getting back into the ball game again. I think you can find people that agree with you very quickly. And that'll give you more ammunition to be able to be in conversations with people that don't agree with you. And these days, that is power. Being able to be in conversations where you're willing to not win or lose, but just maybe learn something, that's really powerful today. That's what I say. Lovely smile, Jan.
Well, I'll jump into that. I mean, you are so right, Bill. I think that
we have lost this ability to have this, this civil discourse with one another. And certainly here in the United States over the last decade or so, there's been so much polarity. And, I've really tried to approach things going, okay, so help me understand why you believe a certain thing, or you vote a certain way, or you made a certain decision. It might not be the same decision that I'm going to make, but I want to understand it, and I want to hear from it. And instead of being angry or dismissive, um, I just want to have a greater capacity. It's kind of, and I think maybe you and I talked about this before, but I was in a car accident last year, near fatal car accident, actually.
Wow.
And I had all of these different observers who watched the accident and who watched what happened. And the reality is everybody had their own truth and experience of it, but it was all very different than what my experience was as the driver of the car getting hit by somebody else, having my car explode in front of me. What everybody else saw was very different, but it was all true. It was all accurate. And so I think that that's where we've got to continue talking to each other. What you said, we if we stop talking to each other, we're never gonna figure it out. We're never gonna come together. So
I
those are just
agree.
some thoughts.
Yeah, I have a definition of the world working. That's where we don't stop talking to each other.
Hmm.
Because once you do stop the conversation, that's where it stays and it doesn't grow and it doesn't, get updated, and it really becomes an old conversation that's there, that sits there almost like it's the truth. And those are I agree with you. The barriers that we face in life isn't even necessarily what the other person believes; it's what we believe they believe.
Right. Yes.
It- first of all, I love your story, Elizabeth. Not obviously that you were in this accident, but but I love the story because it's such a great visual. And I think a lot of us can definitely visualize being in an accident and having, many people, or being in a situation in our lives where we're the person experiencing, and then there are the observers. So I like that visual, and then it all being true because each person has their perception, their idea, what the actual visual of what they saw, and so each person's experience is the truth as far as according to them.
Right.
Um, but I think that I guess I go through the world somewhat differently than many people. I go through the world looking where I am the same as everyone else versus where I'm different. Like, that's not how I navigate the world. I don't look for differences. I look for similarities. And in some ways, maybe that's, I'm not going to label it as good or bad. It's just the way, I want to say I was wired because I've done it from the time I was little. I don't see a difference between, anybody, between myself and anyone else. To me, we all have bodies, we all have hearts, we all have brains, we all have feelings, we all have, and each one of us has those experiences. And for whatever reason, and we develop and we grow based on the experiences we had, and also based on sort of what was passed on to us in a lot of ways, like the fears and beliefs of the people around us also color who we are. But I always tried to look at as everybody as if they're the same as me, and not trying to see, the appearance of somebody as being different, or even what they believe. And sometimes that's not an easy place to be, when someone holds a different belief than you do, and you're kind of really trying really hard, kind of grasp it. It's like, that for whatever reason, they believe that is so wholeheartedly true for them. And on some level, you can't, like Bill and I are there all the time, are there a lot.
Twins don't always agree.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Well, can I interject or add?
Sure.
So I love what you said, Jan, about, I walk around looking for similarities between people. And years ago, so one of the things I do, I'm a business coach. And over the years, I've run a lot of networking groups, led a lot of networking team building exercises, whatever. And, a lot of people, especially in the entrepreneurial community, they'll say, oh, I hate networking. I don't like it. I don't like all that small talk. And the way I've always taught it is it's about getting curious and finding the similarities, finding the connections, asking people, what did you do on summer vacation? Or how old are your kids? Or, where did you grow up? And when you can find just even that one little spark of connection, then you start to build the bridge. And that's how we develop the relationship. So I love what you said about how you walk around looking for the similarities. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you. Because I was actually having on another meeting this morning, we were having that exact conversation. And it wasn't about networking, but it was about going into conversation or um, with other people, with just people that you don't know or people that you do know. And basically, it is finding the stuff that's very almost neutral in the beginning. Like you said, families, vacations, travel,
Yeah.
and finding common ground there, and then realizing, you love to hike, I love to hike, and looking for those kinds of things versus looking for sort of like, well, I want to say the loaded topics,
Yes.
which when you don't get to know someone. And I think not only one thing, Bill, you said, is we don't only go into a conversation with our beliefs but we go in with our, with those visual cues, and those visual cues come with a series of judgments we've already made about certain types of people. For example,
Yeah.
like, oh, they're dressed a certain way, so we judge them and we perceive that they are like this.
You
And
do
so
all of that without knowing you're doing it.
that's
Right.
right, exactly.
It's silent and unconcealed to you,
That's right. And then all of a sudden one day, like, maybe you wake up and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, like, I didn't even really get to know that person. I was like, basically, like, it's like I was wearing foggy glasses that day because I had all those judgments kind of shading the glass, or nice good word, schmutz. You had that schmutz
Yeah.
covering
Some
the
schmutz is
glass.
not removable. Some schmutz is there. It takes a lot of work to remove that schmutz.
Right. That polishing is really a lifelong journey.
Uh,
Well, Elizabeth, something that you said with regard to, in the context of networking, all of life is networking.
right.
And the folks that are in it for transactional exchanges, like, hi, how are you doing? Nice tie. You want to buy my stuff?
Right.
And those,
Ew.
well, see, that's very young. That's the kind of a conversation of a 3-year-old.
Right.
Here, take my toy, give it back. Not giving it back, hit.
Mhm.
So the thing is that the curiosity that really yields the most good is walking into a new exchange of here's this human being that I've not met before. I do know that we're alike. Let's go find out where we're alike.
Mhm.
Yes.
The building of the relationship, um, and how quickly the relationship accelerates has to do with how deeply you're willing to take risks in that. How are we alike? And the other part of it is how willing you are to not say anything or engage if you hit a landmine and there's something there that you completely don't agree with. But that if that happens, that's really helpful, because a person who's interested in making the world a better place and maximizing their return on investment in terms of the hours of their life, they will walk away going, that person is valuable. No matter what they believe, they are valuable to me because they know like 10,000 people. And why is that valuable? Not because it translates into cash, because it translates into social capital.
Mhm.
And all of that, having a great reputation and what have you, can be killed in one small conversation with a person that's really inopportune. So if you're working on mastering expertise in the area of relationship, which is what all life is about, and especially so in business and ongoing growth and development, you are walking into the conversation very curious about what's the potential, how can I bring value to this human being? Look there first, as opposed to what can you do for me. And that, first of all, that means you're going to be listening more than you're speaking. And when you're listening to people, that makes you very interesting for some strange reason, because it's not usual. And the other part of it is that the sooner you get to the point where you've got a very good relatedness, you can test that relatedness by asking power questions, such as, what do you think about the last election? That's a tester. What do you think about what happened, during the hurricanes? Excuse me one second.
Hmm. When I can talk about the hurricanes, so
Yes, you can. You have some expertise in that area. Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm so glad you just said that. I didn't want to interrupt your train of thought, but so I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I had lived here from 2001 to 2007, and then just moved back here in 2022. So I've been here for the last 2 years again, and it's been really interesting to watch what's happened here because of Hurricane Helene. And my experience here is also informed by living through Hurricane Harvey in Houston in 2017.
Yes.
And that was I was actually in town for the Houston hurricane. I was not in town when Asheville happened, when Helene happened here. But the response was the same. It was that the community came together immediately. And the first response was just what you were saying, Bill. How can I bring value? How can I help? How can I help? What do you need? And how can we make that happen for you so that you are safe?
Yeah.
And I remember, Brene Brown is from Houston. And so I got to hear her speak several times actually when I was there. She's such an incredible lecturer. And I got to see her just a few weeks after Harvey had devastated the region in Houston. And she said, when we were rescuing people in lifeboats and, helping people with backpacks, and they're carrying their kids and their teddy bear, and that's all they're taking and they own, because we're not asking who'd you vote for and where do you go to church.
Right.
What do you do for a living? We don't care about any of that. We care about, are you okay, and how can we help you? And we've seen the same thing happen here in Asheville. The outpouring of love and support, not only within the community, but then from the region, and then truly from around the country and around the world. I mean, we've had people from Canada and California and, all different states. And it's just incredible to see people showing up and supporting. So, and of course, everyone's experiences here are different, right? Like if your house washes away down the river and you have nothing left, that's a different experience than, say, my experience, which was I've had major water damage when the city turned the water back on, and now I'm renovating my house. But, I have a roof over my head. So, yes, stressful, but did I lose my home? No. So,
Yeah. Along those lines, that curiosity, when human beings get stripped down to their lowest level, where all that's important is what you can see around you, it's so cool. And when I experience that in normal circumstances that are not brought on by some sort of an external threat or a disaster that just occurred, where somebody is just genuinely interested in taking me by the hand and leading me here and there and pointing me to different things and opportunities and people, it's wonderful, you know? So you start to understand that, being in conversation is the first level of relatedness. Then being in action is the second level of relatedness. And building a reputation as one of those people that is a connector or brings value to every circumstance allows you to be sought after, and it allows you to work with the best people. And what I mean by the best people isn't people who have attained a station in life. I mean the people that are in life to accomplish something. They're going somewhere, you know? They're hard to find. And so you need a strong network, in order to bring those people and attract them, because word of mouth is so much stronger than trying to advertise to find people who are interested in 10xing their anything in their life. And if you want to have fun, being a coach is the most rewarding job in the world, especially if nobody has any idea what you're doing. You know, if you can make a silent difference with people and allow them to get out of their own way, for them to continuously learn how to build their own bridges to progress or their own path to empowerment, day in and day out, whether there's a phone available to phone a friend and there's no audience to ask the question or whatever. The long and the short of it is, it's fun to watch people grow. It's fun to watch them succeed, and it's fun to watch them have fun.
Bill, I would say that there's one other place that I've found, and that is even before conversation. And that's, coming from my experience and my background, is being in the same room when you have, let's say, a series of people practicing something, and it could be dance, but for me, it's yoga. Being a yoga teacher, and these people don't know each other, but they breathe. When you look around the room and you see other people breathing, and you do things like matching someone else's breath or matches, all of a sudden it takes you down to like the basics of physical existence. And
Yes.
you realize that this is another breathing being. And then all of a sudden, that was my experience, and what kept me coming back originally, more than 20 years ago, was the fact that no one cared about all the stuff that we're so much of the world seemed to be preoccupied with. No one cared about ethnicity. Nobody cared about religion. Nobody cared about gender.
Right.
You were there. You were breathing. And you were genuinely welcomed. So you were really welcomed in that place, which was also kind of unique. That was readily accepted. And so that's really where I was, even before conversation, because I experienced it without even exchanging words with people.
Yeah.
I just want to add, Jan, I love that story so much, or that reminder so much. And it makes me think of when I moved to Tallahassee back in, I don't even remember what year, 2007. And I had left my beloved Asheville, and I was missing my friends, and I was all alone, and I was trying to have a baby. And I was just in this really difficult place in life. And I started going to yoga. And I didn't know these people from Adam, but you're right. We just breathed the same air, and we did these exercises together. And then over time, they became my friends, even though they had completely different backgrounds than me.
Hmm.
Um, but it was just that common experience of being really, I mean, you talk about breathing, but like being present with
Hmm.
one another. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's now been shown, like that heart resonance happens, that
Yes.
synchronicity of the heart that comes
Mhm.
when people move together or do anything together. I mean, there's been, they've done studies on like veterans who've gone out and like on excursions or rowing together, who will go into like a synchronized heart rhythm together. And I think that that's what happens. I mean, and it doesn't have to be in, something like practicing yoga, but there is something about that. And I think being outside in nature is another experience, because I think that we can get that through nature. But if you're outside with other people in nature, I think it's even more magnified. There's something about that happens.
What I hear and what both of you are saying is that there's additional context, to this curiosity dynamic, and especially if you're sort of new to a group. Groups have a personality, they have a culture, they have a cross-sectional awareness of propriety and impropriety. It's not spoken, but folks just know how to get along, in a group for yoga. You always talk about, the clannishness of the Amish, or the Bayou people, or the riverboat people on the Mississippi. That there's this code that they don't have to say, because they just take people in and they take care of them. And when you are a smart human being, you walk into every group saying, what's the leverage of the culture that's already here? how can I get into this swing of what's really available to folks by listening and not performing? There's always this thrownness when you're going into a new group to kind of stand out a little bit or say something profound, or and then the neat thing is to look around and see who the informal leaders are in the group so that you can see what they're doing, and kind of study what seems to work about the positive things of this group that you're going into. And when you go into a networking situation, if you don't go there with some really strong ideas of outcomes that you'd like to, come away with, the very least of it should be find out who the leaders are, find out how to access them, and find out what, paths up to empowerment they're going to offer you when you need them. Do all of that before you need it. Start building a bank of really cool conversations for the future. Every conversation is either an investment or it's an expense. And I see so many people being so dissatisfied with the ability to make things happen with their network, and all conversations are expense. So let's just keep it short, to the facts, and on to bigger and better things. Rarely do those bigger and better things come without an investment into a community.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I think Bill, what you're saying, I mean, that's great if it's networking. But I think that when you are talking about, like, let's say life, like more, there is this whole aspect of which I've been spending a lot of times discovering, and I'm now contributing to another book. I'm basically fitting in. And, and as I've been exploring this with seven other people, or well, there's seven of us in total, I guess. So six other people. um, and we come from vast, different parts of the world, different parts of the globe. We're different genders, different ages, and the desire for us all to have a place where we fit in and we feel like we belong. And I think that, that's one thing in a networking situation, because that's somewhat, it's not as, in some ways, depending on who you are and how you do business, it's not as vital to life in general. I mean, it's a great example of the way we are, but
Yeah, and just for a minute, okay? I'm not getting the distinction. Could you maybe give an example that would be different in business networking than in a familiar situation or another situation that you're talking about?
okay, let's say you go into a family situation and you're the only one who's different.
But
That's
different
has
how?
different how, maybe different practices, maybe different beliefs, maybe different political stances, maybe different. So you're different. You don't, maybe, at least that's the way you perceive yourself, and that's the way you've
I
always been treated. You've
The
always been
key there,
treated.
what you just said, is how you perceive yourself as being different. And so that's your kind of like your odd feeling of trying to fit in.
Well, except that the fact that you are treated different too
Okay.
in a situation. So, not everybody is welcoming, whether they're family or not.
Oh, this is a true story anywhere.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, we're coming upon the holidays, and I think everybody knows that,
Sure.
But but I think that there are circumstances which maybe just because there's a lot more of emotional investment, there's a longer history, which is a little bit more complicated than a business type setting where you don't know people, or, not to say you can think you're going to belong in a group of people and still go in depending on what happened to you previously in your life and fitting in and still feel like you don't fit in, even if it is a group of people you think you should fit in with
What,
because
what
of.
if, what if belonging is the wrong it's a wrong unit of measurement?
Right. I mean, well, to me, the first person you need to belong to is yourself.
Right.
Amen.
Right.
Amen. So once you get that, then you belong everywhere. But that's what we make the mistake of. We don't remember that when we go into a situation
Well,
Mhm.
and
but
we
most
feel
people have never
awkward.
examined that, Jan. Most people have
What?
never no most people have never even examined that as a question.
Right.
What is there that's good about me? And once you're at a place where you belong with yourself, you accept yourself, you love yourself. You got to love start everything from there. Then you can start to decide, what are my tools? What's the cool stuff I bring to other human beings that they're going to probably not want all of it, and my job is going to be, in the area of finding out what's valuable to them that I can help them with.
Right. No,
Mhm.
absolutely. But I think it does, no matter where we are. I mean, it has to begin with us.
Well, and
Agreed.
I'd also love to jump in and add that it's also, I do think often when we're in a group situation, whether it's professional or personal, we think, okay, how can I bring value here? But we have to remember we bring value just by showing up,
Hmm.
just by being who we are in all of our magnificence and our glory and our warts and all and everything too,
Yeah.
and that I think, and many of us were raised basing our worthiness or our understanding of our value on what we did, right? Like, if you're a good student, then you're a good kid. If you're a good athlete, then you make your parents proud or whatever. Versus just by the fact that you exist, that you breathe, that you are alive, you're a child of God, like that makes you worthy right there.
Hmm.
And I think that piece is so important that we often forget. We need to remind ourselves of.
Well, I'll go back to something I said earlier. And if you can't name anything of yourself that's of value, just be a good listener. Other people will draw it out of you, or it'll come up as a matter of course in nature. And I think I'm interested, and I've been doing you both know because you both have been guests. I've been doing a podcast on, questions for 100 people, simple questions, and they are very simple. And the whole idea is, it's, when you ask people about themselves, you start to see how what's inside here starts to push out there. What the commitment to the world and the universe and to their heirs is coming from looking at simple little things on the inside. So what I'm saying to you is that life is all about showing up in every place that you think you don't belong, with all the butterflies that go along with it, giving it your best shot, however, without over trying, you know? Show up and wait for your opportunity, to be valuable, and wait until people are listening, and wait whatever. Or there may be a call for you to be really great right off the bat because you showed up and you're exactly what they needed. It just happens in such a neat way. And sometimes you can't get a word in edgewise.
Mhm.
Wrong group. Nothing wrong with you.
I love what you shared, Bill. And I think what happens is that we're a very fast culture and we're used to getting things very quickly. And so, like, we want things yesterday. I mean, I work in the health field. People want, like, whatever they have wrong with them, they want it to be cured yesterday. And I think that what you're talking to requires patience and requires time. And I think what happens is people go into situations, and one is it doesn't happen immediately. And they don't kind of take into account that, let's say they're new and that they are coming into a situation, whether that be social network, like networking, social situation, whatever it is. They don't want to give it the investment and the time. So they look at it as like they go, they feel uncomfortable, and then they don't go back because they don't feel comfortable. Or they go twice or three times and then they're like, okay, well, this doesn't work. And, it reminds me of my dad, rest his soul, who finally called me after like being in the health and wellness business for like 15 years and says to me, I really want something for my psoriasis. And I said to him, Dad, okay, I give him, he calls me the next day and says, it's still there. And I said to him, Dad, how long have you had psoriasis? He said, well, I got it when I was 18. And my father was in his 70s, like, and I'm like, I don't think it's going away in less than 24 hours. But but we've got to be willing to put in the time. I'm glad you like that story, Elizabeth, because
Yeah.
it was really funny. It was like,
It
so
is. Well, and it goes back to something that a word that Bill used earlier too is about investment, right? Like we're not living in this quick fix, society. I mean, I think, Amazon has destroyed us with, you click of a button and you get something at your doorstep in 24 hours. Like that's not how most of the world works most of the time. And we need to invest our time and our energy and our resources and our thoughts and our care and our concern and whatever it is, whether it's health or relationship or work or whatever.
Mhm.
That's a funny story about your dad.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that kind of is at the same level of Archie Bunker.
Yeah.
When Edith is going through the change of life, and
Uh-huh.
and she says something, in her airhead Edith kind of way, and she's all upset about it after she says it, and Archie goes, "There you go again. The change is taking too damn long. I'm giving you 30 seconds now. Change." Well, the other thing too is the timing thing. I'm inventing a parable of an apple tree where it gets a reputation as not being a producer, and one person after another goes to the apple tree and there's no fruit, and then finally no one goes to that tree anymore. But later on, somebody stumbles upon it and tells everyone in the village, "Hey, have you seen that really wonderful apple tree outside of town?" And everybody says, "Yeah, it doesn't give any fruit." And his whole backpack is full of apples. And he dumps it on the table and he says, "Didn't give you any fruit, but it sure is going to feed me for this week."
Wow. Yeah.
So there's that. I mean, all of this comes down to not only doing the work on yourself in advance to decide you have value, but then making a commitment to be totally curious, to listen how you listen. The things that your mind says that you think are your thoughts and it's you speaking. And how is that affecting your behavior in different situations? And are there some of those thoughts that you should just, notice that it's there, put it over in the corner, or even ask it to go in the corner because I'll know you'll be back later. But in the meantime, I've got things I've got to do right now. So in so many instances, people miss out on opportunities in life that pass in an instant where everything was absolutely right for them to get up from their table and make a choice to walk out to the apple tree and check it every day until it brings fruit. And no one does that. They go one time, and if there's no fruit, they don't go back again. That choice is something they are doing, but there's something wrong with the tree. And we regard human beings like that too? She didn't help me at all, or he really was only interested in himself. We make these judgments about people, and sometimes you have to work with people and grow them. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Well, and I would say one thing I've learned how to do over the years, Bill, is to qualify that and to say, in my experience of this person or this product or this restaurant or whatever, this is what happened. That may not be your experience, but that was my experience.
I love that because if you ever played a sport, you take many shots at a basket. Sometimes it goes in, sometimes it doesn't. Yet there are people who will take 5 shots at the basket and none of them go in and say, "I can't do this." Same thing with baseball. You strike out. That's the last thing that you did. You get up and you expect to strike out. But what if your intention has nothing to do with your experience, and all your experience was to get the memory and the muscle moving, and to give you a little bit more expertise for the next time around. And that's what I think conversation is as well.
Right.
You have to be in conversations that you fail in order to grow and learn about maybe being sensitive, or as you said, uh, Elizabeth, maybe changing the wording of it a little bit. Like, in my experience, this is what happened, back then. But when it comes right down to it, making decisions at a point in time about always and everywhere shuts things down for you. And it puts you into a much smaller area of being able to operate.
I'd love to share an example of something that I just witnessed yesterday. So here in Asheville, because I don't know for your listeners if you're aware, we were without drinking water in the entire city for 2 months, almost 60 days. And so, we could barely flush our toilets and that was it, but we couldn't cook, we couldn't drink the water, like it's awful. So the restaurant industry has taken such a huge hit. Many had to close down, and then some that were able to reopen had to do all these special things, to bring these big trucks and tanks of water in to get up and running just to kind of serve the city again. So, yesterday on one of the Facebook groups that I'm in that supports local business, someone bashed one of the local established, well loved, well respected restaurants, and they had a bad experience about one particular thing, and they just kind of went in and they said, "Hey, this was my experience." And what was fascinating to me was how many people wrote in and said, "Oh gosh, I'll never go there." And I was like, you're doing that based on one person's review. And then of course, a bunch of other people wrote in and were like, "Well, wait a minute, we know that restaurant and we know the owner." So what was so beautiful to see how it resolves, that was yesterday morning. I checked in last night. The owner of the restaurant had written the entire group and addressed the situation and said, "Oh my goodness, we are so sorry. Clearly there was a misunderstanding. Here's how we normally do business, blah, 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 blah." And then everybody was suddenly happy again. And I was like, why are we so quick to make a judgment and say, "Well, I'm not going to do this," or "I'm not going to engage there," just because one person had a less than ideal experience? So, anyway.
That's perfect. And I'll tell you what, if you walk into a situation, any situation, I'm going to give it my best shot. You know, sometimes it's going to land. Sometimes I'm going to get I don't get it. What's going on? And sometimes there's going to be a cleanup on aisle 7. You got to have some calm and some confidence in yourself to be able to bring all of the tools and stay in it until the conversation is over. When you jump off of when you jump off of one of those things that go up and down 75 miles an hour all over the countryside and get you back to the place where you got, roller coaster. It's a horrible idea to jump off of that, dude, before it comes to a stop. It's just really, so look at your life like that you're in the middle of something sometimes, and just keep going and just keep trusting yourself and just keep trusting the other people that somehow that bridge is going to get built for you.
Mhm. Mhm.
One thing that came to
But it
mind,
won't get built if you walk away.
yes.
It won't get built if you walk away.
hmm One of the things that came up when you were just talking, Bill, is this whole element to me of coming also in with not only like an openness, but an element of compassion.
Mm.
This element of, you were talking, Elizabeth, about that restaurant, is that when people are not at their best, kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt and actually being practicing a little bit of like, I have no idea what happened to them today. I have no idea what happened before that, like 5 minutes ago. And I have no idea, that person cut me off, oh my gosh, like who knows, and I think we're so quick to, move into this sort of reflexive behavior of like, oh, well, goodness, that person cut me off. So I'm going to honk them or I'm going to speed up and cut them off, and we're not, as human beings, we tend not to be able to go into this kind of role of like, I really don't know what happened to them before they saw me or before they did what they did. And maybe if I know them well enough, or if I'm in contact with them and I could ask them, like, is everything okay? because you seem to be, but maybe, it is on the highway or whatever, but, and you don't know that person. But, it's one way to come into a conversation is not to be so quick to judge in general.
Well, and isn't there's some popular saying, it's like, be kind, for everybody you know is fighting a battle.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know who said that, but it's so true. Like, we all have these things happening behind the scenes that we have no clue what people are going on behind closed doors.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, the other thing too, you know what I took away from your exchange with the business owner coming on, if I understood you correctly, they basically came on, took responsibility for what
Yes.
happened, not
Yes.
our intention in life. And let me tell you, they probably even said, if you come on back here, we're going to give you at least a free dessert. You know, give us a second chance to make a first impression. And thank you so much for letting us know how you really experienced us.
Yes.
These are people in my mind. I don't know them. I've never met them, but I'd wish damn sure like to.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, our friend Kate, who always says that you can be a total idiot, but the question is, you just have to be willing to take responsibility for that time, and to know that however you behaved wasn't appropriate, and to kind of own up to it. It's like, okay, I can be a whatever, but am I willing to, like, be responsible for everything that happens afterwards, for the repercussions of that?
Well, we and funny, so it sounds like I spend all my life on Facebook, but also yesterday in a Facebook group, a different one was talking about parenting, and a mama was getting on and saying, "Oh my God, I just yelled at my kid this morning, and I feel so horrible, and I'm such a terrible mother, and what do I do about this?" And everybody responded what you were saying, Jan, is they said, it's okay. We all mess up. You just got to own it and just say, I am really sorry, honey. And I did not mean to yell at you. And I will do my best to do better next time. And then have a conversation about it. And then, try and shift the behavior. But reparation starts when you acknowledge that, hey, I was being a jerk and I'm really sorry. And let's see how we can do it differently next time.
There's an interesting dynamic there too, Elizabeth, and that is most people are unaware. They're not listening to themselves listen. They're not listening to themselves speak. And in many cases, they're not even interested in what they, beyond making a really hard point, they're not interested in the damage that they may have created in the listeners ear. So in a lot of instances, the people are in denial that they did anything wrong, first and foremost, which is not the game. That's not the point. Being right is the booby prize. Having a relationship where you actually are open to finding out exactly what it was that was upsetting to the other person. Maybe it wasn't your tone of voice. Maybe it wasn't your words. Maybe it was something that you said that only the two of you know anything about, and they're not sure if you've shared that with other people. There's so many different layers to it. But when you go back and you spend the time to authentically clean up on aisle 7, you really can get the cleanup done and walk away with no ripples. Everything is smooth, and we're ready to take off and fly together from here.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think the other thing that happens is, let alone the fact that we say we come in, let's say you come in with judgments, let's say, or whether you do, or like, is the fact that we assume people who know us understand us. You know,
Sometimes.
we make these assumptions about other people of, like, if they love me, they know, if they love me, they know me, when, and they understand me, when really no one understands you but you. you know,
Now
so
that's giving some people a lot of credit, Jan.
yeah, well, yes, that's true. It's true. But there are those of us who hopefully have tried, or are still in the process, or whatever, of trying to know themselves better and whatever. But I think we do make these assumptions about people, whether it be loved ones or friends. I consider my friends I love, so I don't really separate out the two. But is this feeling of, like, oh, or if they really knew me, kind of thing, and I think that we kind of a, we make a lot of assumptions in that way of
Yeah.
like being understood. And we rely on the fact that we hold that very dear of like, oh, okay, I'm going to hang out with that person because they quote unquote understand me
Yeah.
or they
There's like,
get me.
yeah, kind of a conflation with trust that,
Yeah.
misunderstanding equals lack of trust. And
Mm,
they're really not the same.
right.
And it's a completely different conversation.
Right.
I find myself, always coming back to this fundamental tenet of human beings. We kind of suck at this. And if more people knew and understood that, maybe they'd give themselves just a little bit more room, and give other people just a little more room and try to find the humor in things that don't work as opposed to, going to battle stations, right?
Well, and I wonder how much of that also comes with age and wisdom and life experience too. I mean, I'm now squarely in my mid 50s, and I give myself and others a lot more grace than I did in my 20s and 30s and even 40s. But yeah, it's like the older you get and the more you see life, it's like, oh, okay, I don't need to like jump on, every other driver. Although I will say, my daughter, I was raised in Connecticut and where you both live. And, when I'm yelling at other drivers on the road and my daughter will say, Mom, they can't hear you. And I'm like, but they're still stupid. She's
Yep.
like, but they can't hear you. I'm like, that's not the point. I just need to, say it.
Well, we had several episodes like that when my younger one was probably about 13 years old, and these people would drive crazy, and my wife would let loose with an expletive, or I would, you effing this, you effing that, and Becky said, why don't we just call them person? Person, you are driving very badly.
Well, I have a funny story about that. So when our daughter was born, Eric and I said, okay, we've got to make sure that we tone down the cursing because we didn't want her to absorb that at such a young age. And I said, well, let's find a good word that feels like you've got a lot of emotion behind it. And we ended up choosing pamplemousse, which is French for grapefruit.
Yeah.
And so try it next time you're driving and you're going along and someone cuts you off. You go, you pamplemousse, and you feel like you've just called them like some horrible name, but you've called them a grapefruit.
Sounds like a Steve Miller lyric, but that's actually in my mind, that's the gamifying of life.
Mm,
Where you can plan and pack a big lunch for things that would normally just be a huge breakdown. You carry it around for the rest of the day. But saying pamplemousse allows you to have some completion in the moment. They, like Bill Cosby always called you gunky, or
yeah.
whatever. But you have to have some kind of an appropriate. And Edith Bunker, all right for you, Marianne.
And I'm reminded of the element of what you spoke to, Bill, of humor, of the situations in my life where I actually felt like I was like it was like being on a Seinfeld episode, and when I thought to myself and going in and just being able to laugh at it, going to some family function when I was talking to my therapist at the time, and I said, I'm going to go into this family function, this bar mitzvah, and somebody's going to come up to me and say, oh, you do that yoga thing, right? That's where you stand on your head. And literally, I walk into the bar mitzvah. I'm not there 5 minutes when my cousin comes up to me and says, oh, are you still doing that yoga thing? Isn't that where you stand on your head? Well, I lost it. I just started to laugh, because it was so funny because I had said it like the day before. And I think as opposed to getting upset about it, because I would always look like, oh my gosh, that's all they think of yoga is a whole bunch of, kind of thing or whatever. I would go through the diatribe in my head. It was really funny and I love, if you can find situations like that where you can actually find the humor in it, then it kind of breaks the tension or the rhythm or the whatever, the words to kind of it dissolves the anger or the whatever, the judgment a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an aspect here too, which I think always fundamentally points back to mindfulness and being present.
Hmm.
You have to, as a human being, while you're constituting yourself as a humorist, that means that you also have to allow yourself to experience what's really happening.
Hmm.
And we use exaggeration and overstatement so much in terms of our storytelling to other people about what happened. And there's more trauma in many cases of the retelling over and over and over again than there actually was in the, in the experience. And so if we as a culture suddenly decided that you didn't get more style points in a conversation for how, atomic bombness there was in terms of your experience and how it killed you and how you'll never ever get over it, and that you literally died, and all that sort of stuff, it's like, broke my finger. It hurt. It's better now. You know, that's not an interesting conversation for most people. However, it's what really happened. Most of our lives are not interesting enough to be on the side of a milk carton. They just aren't, So why not pump it up and make it more than it was? And if you don't do that, you know who the biggest fool in the room is? You're listening to yourself say that nonsense. Mindfulness would allow you to go, no, I got nothing.
Right.
Your story is going to be more interesting than what I have to give right now. Why don't we listen to you?
Right. Hey, Bill, can I do a little segue here? Because
Absolutely.
one thing I want to make sure we talk just for a minute about is, the whole reason why you and I know each other is the book that just came out that we were co-authors in, called Faces of Grief, which is published by Grief Hab and Samantha Ruth, who helped to bring us all together. And it's this idea of, when we can share our stories and we find that universal thread that ties us together, and in this particular compilation, right, we're talking about grief, and everybody has experienced grief in some way, shape, or form in their life. And so when we find other people who have had a similar experience, there's that connection and that understanding, the vulnerability, the openness, all of that, and go, oh, okay. It goes back to what you were talking about, Jan, at the beginning about, looking for similarities, looking for connection. So I just wanted to make sure we give a little plug for the book Faces of Grief, and for people who are looking for stories around grief and loss, it's a good support.
Well, even if you're not looking for stories around grief and loss, this is, I would say, almost an amalgamation of every kind of music style. If you would consider, the classics with Bach and Beethoven, and then you move into, blues and into country and rockabilly and rock and roll and all the rest of that sort of thing. It doesn't matter what you're interested in. One of those stories is gonna speak to you.
Yeah.
And we've got so many different cuts at how people have experienced loss and grief, and not just loss from passing of a loved one, sometimes, a life change, or, a divorce, or losing your job, or that sort of thing. And so the neat part of it is it took a whole year. So we really had to dwell in this conversation in terms of thinking about our story, thinking about what we wanted to share with people, writing a rough draft, having that edited with suggestions being made, and going through this whole process of not necessarily just telling people our story, but telling our story with power, And what you're going to see when you read these stories, they're so moving, each and every one of them. And some of them have such an optimistic and wonderful, takeaway message at the end of the chapter. I really think it's worth whatever you go through, in terms of doing this. You may not want to do it. It's a pretty easy read. It's a few hundred pages, but it's large print. But at the same time, drink water. Definitely drink water while you're reading this book.
And
Yeah.
Jan, Jen, you said you have a compilation book coming out soon too?
Yeah, I mean, I have that. I was in this one, but I have another one coming out. Yeah, not quite sure when. Um, and yeah, it's a really interesting, but I guess, either way, um, what I'm reminded, because this is other book and Faces of Grief were really stories. And I think there's great power when we tell our stories, and we share them, because we give other people the power to share their story. um I think that people learn by example, and they're like, oh, okay, well, look, so and so shared their story and what they went through. And I think that that's where the power, whether you've lost someone or you've been in a situation of grief or not, it's just being able to read someone's story, which gets you further in touch with your own story, whatever that is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agree.
definitely props to Sam. Um, Benjamin Franklin said when they were writing the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, getting 13 clocks to chime at the same time is a very difficult task. And even more so with 30 authors, most of whom have never done a bit of professional writing in their life. And what we've actually come up with, I'm very proud of. I'm proud of what we did together as a group. And I'm also proud of the enthusiasm and energy that's behind getting it out to the folks to read. And I hope it spawns like 20 or 30 more books of a similar ilk. We're in the process of examining other ways that we can cut at this. Like, tell me about your journey back to the light. You know, everyone has lost. There's nobody who doesn't. And I've taken Jim Morrison's saying of no one gets out alive. And I've updated it to include, and nobody gets out without their share of grief. So
Mhm.
knowing that, again, this is our opportunity to pack a big lunch.
Right.
So thank you. So Jan, anything in terms of wrap up?
No, not, I mean, not as far as we go, as far as just, I guess, go in with into a conversation, into an experience, with just looking at as every opportunity as an opportunity to learn, to learn,
Elizabeth?
to learn and grow. I'll just say that. Sorry, Bill.
Nope. Say it again because I talked over you, please.
I said to learn and grow.
To learn and grow, ladies and gentlemen. Dwell on that for a moment.
Yeah.
And be willing to have that definition change and grow before your very eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, similarly, it's about just having curiosity, just approaching the world with curiosity and being, I wonder about this and I wonder about that. And how is this going to work? So it makes life more interesting that way.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely agree with you. And curious mind is the hardest thing to acquire. It does require work. It's not something that comes naturally after you're about 5 years old.
Mm.
Uh, in our culture, it's usually beat out of you by the time you're 5. So having the curiosity of a child in any event is how a lot of people say that you stay young. And with that said, Elizabeth, it's been a ball having you on here with us. I really appreciate your insights and the brushstrokes on the canvas here. Buddyette, Jan, I live for these hours a week, to get back on here and have our little chats and different cuts at understanding. What's interesting to me about all the stuff that we do is we start the conversation by making points. And we only do that to allow the other folks that are on the call to have a reaction to it and to come up with something really cool from their life that will make a difference with you. Because if any of us just go on in a monologue, I don't think that you can listen to that for very long and get much to take away from it. But the three of us working together, I feel like we did a couple of good things today. And I actually got goosebumps a couple of times. So thank you for that.
Well, good. Well, it was a joy. It was a joy to be with you both. So thank you so much for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Jan, do you want to send our folks home with a little bit of an assignment here before the holidays?
Yes, absolutely. So, your assignment, if you choose to take it or accept it, is to pick up the phone, drop a text to someone, tell them how important they are to you, how happy you are that they are in your life. And if you need support, see if you can find someone to talk to message with. Don't realize that there's no need to be alone when you feel you do not want to be.
Excellent. Ladies, folks at home, we are lighting the candle, a world that works, and I have a lot of evidence for that. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.